feel like I really understand that we have a responsibility to change the narrative around what we are delivering to young people in the classroom. But I would describe the actual...
Picture this. A man quietly sits in one of the most watched wedding ceremonies in recent British royal history, wearing no crown, holding no official title, carrying none of the pomp that usually surrounds royalty. Yet somehow, he's the most intriguing person in the room. He descends from Italian counts. He built a luxury property empire from scratch before he turned 25. He fathered a child with a Harvard-educated architect. He co-parented through a broken engagement. And then, almost as if the universe had a plan, he walked straight into Britain's most complicated royal family at the exact moment it was being torn apart by scandal, pandemic, and public fury. Nobody handed him a script. Nobody prepared him for the storm. And yet here he is, years later, still standing. Still building. Still showing up. His name is Edoardo Mapelli Mozzi. Most people know him as that guy who married Princess Beatrice. But that label doesn't even scratch the surface of who this man actually is, where he came from, and what he's quietly been building, in business, in family, and in life, long before any royal connection put him on the world's radar. Today, we're pulling back every layer. And I promise you, what you're about to discover is far more fascinating than any tabloid headline has ever let on. But before we dive in, if you're someone who loves going beyond the glossy surface of royal stories, hit that like button right now, share this video with a friend who's obsessed with the royals, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment below telling me which royal figure you want us to investigate next. Your support genuinely keeps this channel alive. Alright, let's get into the full story. To understand Edoardo Mapelli Mozzi, you have to start where all great stories start, at the beginning. And his beginning is, frankly, unlike most people's. He was born on November 19, 1983, in London. Right away, two worlds collided in him. His father, Alessandro Mapelli Mozzi, known to most simply as Alex, was a former British Olympic alpine skier who later reinvented himself as an art dealer. His mother, Nikki Williams Ellis, worked across commercial real estate, design, and eventually charitable endeavors. So from day one, Edoardo was surrounded by creativity, ambition, sport, and a certain fearlessness about reinvention. But here's where the story gets genuinely fascinating. On his father's side, Edoardo carries the blood of an aristocratic Italian family whose title of Count was formally granted in 1913 by King Victor Emmanuel III. Now, when Italy's monarchy dissolved after World War II, these kinds of titles lost their legal standing within the Italian Republic. And the United Kingdom, of course, doesn't officially recognize foreign noble titles either. But the heritage, the lineage, that's real. And it matters, not because of any legal privilege it grants, but because of the cultural identity and sense of history it carries. Trace the family roots far enough, and you arrive at the Villa Mapelli Mozzi in northern Italy, a striking estate with origins stretching back to at least the 15th or 18th century, depending on which historical sources you consult. It began its life as a monastery before eventually being transformed into the kind of grand private residence that speaks to centuries of European aristocracy. That kind of ancestral backdrop tends to shape a person in ways that are hard to quantify but impossible to ignore. Yet despite that very European, very blue-blooded heritage, Edoardo was raised firmly within the British establishment. He attended the Dragon School in Oxford, one of the most prestigious prep schools in England, the kind of institution that produces Rhodes Scholars, Olympic athletes, and future prime ministers with almost suspicious regularity. From there, he moved on to Radley College, an elite boarding school in Oxfordshire. And then came the University of Edinburgh, where he earned a master's degree in politics. So you have this fascinating combination: centuries of Italian noble history, British boarding school discipline, and an academic grounding in political thought. Whatever path Edoardo chose after university, it was never going to be ordinary. Here's where the story takes its first genuinely unexpected turn. Most people with Edoardo's educational pedigree follow a fairly predictable path: finance, law, politics, perhaps the art world like his father. Instead, at just 23 years old, Edoardo Mapelli Mozzi founded his own luxury property development company. The year was 2007. The location where the idea crystallized: his father's home in Lamu, Kenya. He named the company Bonda Property. The word Bonda means house in Swahili, a nod to that East African moment of inspiration and a declaration of purpose from the very start. Now, 2007 is a remarkable year to launch a property business. Within months of its founding, the global financial crisis was beginning to crack the foundations of the world's economy. The very industry Eduardo had just entered was about to experience one of its most brutal contractions in modern history. For a 23-year-old with no track record and a brand new company, that could have been the end of the story before it even began. It wasn't. What Eduardo understood, perhaps instinctively, perhaps through his mother's influence in commercial real estate, was that luxury property doesn't operate by the same rules as the broader market. Wealth doesn't disappear in a financial crisis, it concentrates. And the ultra-wealthy don't stop wanting beautiful homes. They just become more selective about what beautiful means. Bonda Property was built around that insight. Rather than mass-market developments or generic luxury builds, the company focused on deeply considered, design-led residences for high-net-worth clients. Think meticulous restoration of character properties, Georgian townhouses, Victorian terraces, historic buildings with bones that ordinary developers would either demolish or butcher. Bonda's approach was to honor the history of a space while transforming it into something that functioned perfectly for contemporary, affluent life. The company's model is remarkably comprehensive. Bonda handles everything from initial site acquisition right through to development, full interior design, and ongoing project management. For clients spending millions on a home, the appeal of a single trusted team managing every detail is obvious. And as Eduardo built a reputation for quiet elegance over ostentatious flash, his stated preference for spaces that feel lived in and meaningful rather than showy and sterile, word spread in exactly the circles where it needed to. By his early 30s, Bonda had developed hundreds of thousands of square feet across London, with a project portfolio reportedly valued in the hundreds of millions of pounds. Prime addresses like Notting Hill and Leicester Square became synonymous with the Bonda aesthetic, thoughtfully restored, impeccably finished, designed for people who want substance alongside luxury. Has every project been a triumph? No. That would be a fairy tale. A high-profile development in Australia reportedly faced serious difficulties, with reports of the project entering administration. International expansion in the property world is notoriously complex: local regulations, market timing, unexpected economic headwinds. Setbacks like that are part of the story of any ambitious developer. What defines someone isn't whether they encounter failure, but how they respond to it. Eduardo kept building, kept evolving the company, kept pushing Bonda forward. Before the royal chapter of his life began, Eduardo was living through a deeply personal story that rarely gets told with the nuance it deserves. He was in a long-term relationship with Dara Huang, an American architect of remarkable achievement. Harvard-educated, the founder of her own successful design firm, a woman who built her career through exceptional talent and relentless hard work. Together, they made a compelling couple, two creative, ambitious people navigating the demanding worlds of architecture and property development. In 2016, they welcomed a son, Christopher Wolfe Mapelli Mazzi, known to the family, and eventually to royal watchers everywhere, as Wolfie. The couple were engaged at some point during this period, but by around 2018, they had separated. The details of what happened between Eduardo and Dara have remained genuinely private, which, frankly, is as it should be. Neither has given tell-all interviews or sought to define the other publicly. What emerged instead was something arguably more impressive: a functioning, respectful co-parenting arrangement built around Wolfie's well-being. By the time Eduardo married Princess Beatrice, Wolfie was old enough to participate meaningfully in the ceremony, serving as page boy and, in a wonderfully charming detail, as his father's best man. Think about that image for a moment. A little boy, standing beside his father on one of the most significant days of his life, fulfilling one of the most important roles of the day. It says something profound about the kind of father Eduardo has chosen to be. Dara Huang, for her part, has continued to thrive professionally. Her design firm remains active and respected, and accounts from those close to the situation consistently describe the co-parenting dynamic as genuinely amicable, the kind of mature, child-focused arrangement that most separated couples aim for and many struggle to achieve. How exactly does a property developer from an Italian noble family end up engaged to a British princess? The answer is more organic than you might expect. The Mapelli Mazzi and York families, that's Prince Andrew and Sarah Ferguson's family, had moved in overlapping social and charitable circles for years before romance was ever part of the equation. These are both wealthy, well-connected British families with interests in art, property, charity, and sport. In the relatively small world of London's upper-class social scene, their paths crossed regularly. Eduardo and Beatrice knew each other as friends, or more precisely, as the children of families who knew each other long before anything romantic developed. After Beatrice ended her long-term relationship with Dave Clark in 2016, and after Eduardo's separation from Dara Huang around 2018, something shifted. Two people who had always been somewhere in each other's peripheral vision suddenly found themselves with new space in their lives and, perhaps, a new readiness to let something real develop. By early 2019, they were appearing publicly together. A National Portrait Gallery event caught the attention of eagle-eyed royal watchers. Then came Lady Gabriella Windsor's wedding in May 2019, where they attended as a couple, and any remaining speculation about the nature of their relationship was put firmly to rest. Then, in September 2019, in Italy, that country that has always been woven through Eduardo's identity, he proposed. The ring he helped design himself features a baguette-cut diamond in a floral motif. Buckingham Palace formally announced the engagement on September 26, 2019. The reaction was warm. Here was Beatrice, so often overshadowed by her more media-savvy cousins William and Harry, finding her footing in a relationship that seemed genuinely grounding. The wedding that Eduardo and Beatrice originally planned was a traditional royal affair. The Chapel Royal at St. James's Palace. A reception at Buckingham Palace. Spring 2020. Guest lists, press arrangements, the full machinery of a royal celebration. Then two things happened, one deeply personal to the family, one world-altering. Prince Andrew's November 2019 BBC interview, in which he attempted to address his association with convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein, was a catastrophic miscalculation that generated one of the most damaging news cycles in recent royal memory. The fallout was immediate and severe. Andrew stepped back from royal duties. The family faced a media storm of extraordinary intensity. Suddenly, a high-profile royal wedding connected to the Duke of York was the last thing anyone in the family wanted. And then, in early 2020, COVID-19 arrived. The original plan was abandoned entirely. Instead, on July 17, 2020, Eduardo and Beatrice married privately at the Royal Chapel of All Saints at Royal Lodge in Windsor. Only immediate family attended. No press. No broadcast. A ceremony stripped down to its essential meaning, two people making a commitment to each other, witnessed by the people who love them most. What Beatrice wore that day became one of the most touching details of the entire story. Queen Elizabeth II offered her granddaughter a vintage Norman Hartnell gown, ivory silk taffeta, that Her Majesty herself had originally worn in 1962. Paired with the Queen's diamond-fringed tiara, worn at her own wedding in 1947, Beatrice walked down the aisle wearing two pieces of the most intimate royal history imaginable. In a year defined by loss, isolation, and uncertainty, there was something quietly profound about that connection to the women who came before her. Prince Andrew walked his daughter down the aisle. The moment was private, real, and, in its own complicated way, deeply human. Post-wedding life for Eduardo and Beatrice has been deliberately grounded. Neither is a full-time working royal funded by the public purse. Beatrice works as vice president of strategic partnerships at a software company, and Eduardo continues to lead Bonda Property. That professional independence gives them something valuable: the ability to build a life that is theirs, not solely defined by royal obligation. They moved from a London apartment to a converted farmhouse in the Cotswolds, gardens, a pool, tennis courts, the kind of space that accommodates children, dogs, and a genuine sense of home, while maintaining their London presence for work and school. Their family grew quickly and not without anxiety. In September 2021, Beatrice gave birth to their first child together, a daughter named Sienna Elizabeth Mapelli Mazzi, christened at the Chapel Royal. Then, in late 2024, another pregnancy was announced. But the arrival of their second daughter, Athena Elizabeth Rose Mapelli Mazzi, on January 22, 2025 at Chelsea and Westminster Hospital, came earlier than expected, prematurely, and with all the fear and urgency that premature birth brings. Athena's early arrival shook the family deeply. Beatrice, visibly affected by the experience, subsequently became a patron of a charity focused on eliminating premature births, channeling personal anguish into public purpose in exactly the way the best royal work has always done. Athena was christened in December 2025. So as of 2026, the Mapelli Mazzi household contains 3 children: Wolfie, now around 10 years old, Sienna, and baby Athena. By all accounts, the blended family dynamic functions with warmth and intention. Beatrice embraced stepmother life with genuine enthusiasm, and the co-parenting arrangement with Dara Huang has remained stable. No story about this family can be told honestly without acknowledging the long, complicated shadow cast by Prince Andrew's ongoing controversies. The Epstein-related documents that became public contained references to Beatrice, though critically, she was not accused of any wrongdoing. The mere association with that nightmare has been an unfair but inescapable burden. Through all of it, Eduardo's public posture has been one of quiet, consistent steadiness. He doesn't engage with the chaos. He doesn't give interviews defending himself or his family. He shows up, at Beatrice's side at public events, at design conferences for his business, at charity functions. He demonstrates, through action rather than statement, that he is not rattled by the storm. His charitable commitments offer another window into his character. Among them, co-founding Cricket Builds Hope, an initiative using cricket as a vehicle for youth development and opportunity in Rwanda. It's the kind of project that doesn't generate headlines, which is partly why it matters. Nobody does that for press attention. He and Beatrice also share something that rarely gets discussed. Both have been open about living with dyslexia. In a world that still too often treats learning differences as deficits, two people who have each navigated that challenge and built successful professional lives have a particular kind of shared understanding. It's a small detail that reveals something large about the foundation of their connection. Oh, who is Eduardo Mapelli Mazzi, really? He is not a fairy tale prince. He is not a villain conjured by tabloid imagination. He is something more interesting and more human than either of those archetypes allow. He is a man who built something real, a business, a reputation, a family, before the world was watching. A man who navigated the end of one relationship with enough grace and maturity to build something genuinely healthy for his son. A man who stepped into one of the most scrutinized families on earth at its most vulnerable moment and, rather than seeking the spotlight that scrutiny creates, simply got on with the work of building a life. The Italian blood, the British education, the property empire, the blended family, the private wedding in a pandemic, the premature baby, the charitable cricket project in Rwanda, taken together, these pieces form the portrait of someone who doesn't define himself by proximity to greatness, but by what he actually does with his days. And maybe that's the most royal quality of all, not the titles, not the tiaras, but the willingness to show up, consistently and quietly, for the things and people that matter. Love under a spotlight doesn't always survive. The fact that this one appears to be thriving, complete with all its complications, blended edges, and hard-won stability, says something worth sitting with. If any part of this story changed how you see Princess Beatrice's world, or gave you a new perspective on what it actually takes to build a grounded life in extraordinary circumstances, tell me in the comments below. I read every single one. And if you want more deep dives like this, stories that go beyond the headlines and actually try to understand the human beings behind the royal image, hit subscribe right now, smash that like button, and share this video with one person who you know would love it. Turn on notifications so you never miss the next one. We've got more stories coming. And I promise, they'll surprise you too. See you in the next one. Stay curious.